to another episode of View from the Pulpit. It's a podcast where we discuss and explore the place and function of preaching in the church. My name is Ben Smith, and I am a South Georgia pastor, and I've been preaching for over 20 years. This podcast is a podcast about preaching, but it is not one just for preachers. In fact, whether you are behind the pulpit or in the pew, my prayer is that these conversations will be helpful to you in understanding the role and place preaching has in the church. Here on the podcast, we'll have conversations with pastors and church members about the role of preaching, the labor of preparing to preach, and lots more. I hope to help the church recover an understanding and appreciation for what preaching is and how God has ordained its role in the church. Now, I've been asking each week to help promote, and I'm going to do it again now, just a little shameless self-promotion. So if you would, in whatever podcast app you use, consider subscribing, liking, following, whatever term your particular app uses. And then rating and reviews help too. So when you rate and review a podcast, it helps push it up in the podcasts that are promoted in the app. And then I think the word of mouth is probably the most effective way of spreading the word. So if you have a friend that you think this would be helpful to, consider sharing the podcast with them and encouraging them to listen. Today, it is my great pleasure to have a friend of mine, Dr. Levi Skipper, with us. Levi is the pastor of Sagemont Church in Houston, Texas. Before that, he served as vice president of church strengthening for the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. And before that, he pastored several churches here in the state of Georgia. He's got his undergraduate from Shorter University, a master's of divinity from New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, and a doctorate of ministry from Luther Rice University. Maybe the thing that is most impressive about Levi is when he was a student pastor in the Rome, Georgia area, he had the eminent Ben Smith come and speak, and that set his ministry course in action. And no, Levi and I went to school together at Shorter, and that's where we came to know each other. His wife, Krista, is from Tifton, Georgia, so she's a South Georgia girl, and they have 4 children. Now, Levi, you're fairly new there at Sagemont. You went there in, is it 2003?
No. I've been at this particular church for a year and like a month. Yeah.
Okay. So are you still consider yourself there in the honeymoon?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So tell us just briefly about the church.
Well, Sagemont Church has a rich history. It's a church that kind of has had its flagship ministry of being a debt-free church. And so throughout the years under John Morgan's leadership, who was just a great leader. He'd been here for like 53 years as the pastor. He was also the founding pastor. He led them to just do amazing things, build worship centers and facilities, all debt-free. So that's been kind of their flagship. And so we've had the opportunity now to kind of come in and get some clarity on mission and what we do as a church, and working even now with a group of individuals on where the church is going.
So if I understand you right, you followed the ministry of the founding pastor?
No. So there was one other pastor between myself and him. Matt Carter served here for a couple of years, and then I followed his tenure.
Okay, excellent. Well, with this podcast, I'm talking with preachers, and I literally, when I had the idea of doing this, I went through my contact list and just looked through the list of men in my contact list, guys that I have known over the years, some like you that had a friendship that goes way back to college days, and some, not as long, and just look for guys that in every walk and type of ministry I wanted to talk to, and so we're going to have folks on here that are in very small rural churches, and we've got a few retired guys that are going to participate, and then we've got some folks like you. Now, you're in a unique church, so your website or somewhere I read said that Sagemont has like 12,000 plus members. Is that true?
Yeah. So now you know as well as I do. I mean, membership and how many actually attend is a different story, right? So I think last Sunday we had 4,400 in church. And so that's kind of the size of the church.
Okay, so but at 4,400 people, that's a different experience of preaching to that room than a brother that's preaching to 100, 200, even 1,000. So, and you've been in every size dynamic of church. So how does preaching to 4,000 plus differ from preaching to a room of 100?
Well, I mean, this is going to be probably a weird answer, but to me, there isn't that big of a difference, because when you prepare to preach, or at least maybe I should speak just for myself, as I prepare to preach here, it's the same as I prepare to preach to a room of 100 or less. And so when I do seek to deliver the message, I kind of have an audience of one in mind, glorify the Lord in the sermon, but then I really just want to speak to individuals. So it's kind of, I mean, I know it's not the same in the sense of what it looks like, but as far as preparation and delivery, it's very much the same to me.
So let's talk about that. With all of the interviews I've done, one of the questions I've started with is walk me through your week. So Monday morning, you're getting ready to preach on the coming Sunday. Walk me through your process of choosing the passage that you'll preach, how you prepare the sermon, and how do you get from that Monday morning start to the pulpit on that coming Sunday?
Well, for me, I stay 3 weeks ahead, right? So when I'm writing a sermon on Monday, I'm actually writing the sermon that I'll preach in 3 weeks. So I'm not writing that very next Sunday. So let me kind of back up on this to kind of give you a big overview. So 30,000 foot view, I preach through books of the Bible primarily. And I just do verse by verse. So as far as choosing what, text I'm going to preach on, it's kind of chosen for me. I'm just taking whatever the next little section is in that particular book. Right now I'm preaching through John's gospel. And then again, a 30,000 foot view, I typically do 3 series a year. And those are timed. So I do typically one in January, and the primary purpose for that is because I know I'll have new people show up to church just because there are people making New Year's resolutions. They're like, we're going to go back to church now. So I usually have a series there to use probably a common term is kind of a hook series, something that kind of grabs their attention and pulls them in. And then I'll do another series right after Easter. And I do that on purpose because I'm using that kind of as a hook to pull people from Easter Sunday into whatever that series is going to be. And typically it's it's somewhat of a series that would be advantageous to somebody who's either a nominal Christian or even an unchurched person. And then I'll do one at the start of the new year in the fall. So those are 3 series, and typically I will do those for about 4 to 5 weeks. Will be the extent of that series. And then I just get right back into the verse-by-verse study of whatever I'm doing. So since I've been here, I've preached through the book of Colossians, and I have started the book of John, and I will be in John 8 in 2 weeks, back in John 8. That's where we pick back up.
So do you pause your preaching through the books to do your series, or do you try to finish those up?
I pause to do the series, and I let everybody know. It's like, hey, we're gonna press pause here, and then in January, just because of the life of the church and kind of where I am as the pastor, the new guy, we're preaching a series right now on mission. What do we do as a church? How are we seeking to accomplish that? So that's what I've been preaching on the past. Well, this Sunday will be 5 weeks in a row. So now, when Monday rolls around, what I do, and I'll kind of give it to you in the vein of preaching verse by verse. I know what the next section already is. So a little backup on that means I've already done the preparation of what is the background of the text, what is the purpose of the book. I'm getting all of the background information. So I kind of have that already front loaded when I'm going through a particular book. So that's hugely beneficial to me. I don't feel like I'm working, trying to figure the background on every single text, every single Monday necessarily, because I have the big picture already, because I'm preaching through a book instead of just kind of grabbing passages throughout the Bible all over the place. So that's helpful. And then I obviously read the fire out of the passage. That means I read it several times, and I'll read it from different translations as well. And I typically write it out. So I've got long white sheets of paper, and I write the text. I handwrite the text out, but I do that on purpose. One, it just helps me listen to the text as I write it out. So I'm reading and I'm writing. But then
you handwrite the text. You're not talking about your sermon.
No. I handwrite the text. I hadn't even started writing the sermon yet. Right. This is all this is how I'm studying the text. So I'm handwriting the text out on a long sheet of paper. And then after I do that, I'm already picking up some big themes just by letting the text speak, right? What does the text say? And I'll just jot those themes down to the side of that sheet of paper somewhere. And then the next step I take is just a word study. And I will, John's gospel obviously written in Greek. I'm not trying to act like a Greek scholar here. I've got Logos on my computer. So I just go through, I grab some of those Greek words and extend on those Greek words in my writing on the sheet of paper, which is very beneficial. And then I usually end up rewriting that text with those Greek words kind of mashed in there, those meanings. Just, I don't know, for whatever reason, it gives kind of this great picture to me.
Like the old Amplified
Exactly.
Bible
That is exactly right. Okay. Yeah. And what's neat to me is like you view every word in the New Testament as a treasure box. So I want to open up each one of those words and see what treasure's in there. See how it was used in that context in that particular day. Maybe there's some other ways in which it was actually used, to describe different, modes or different activities. All of those things are just super helpful. So I'm working through that. Once I do that, then usually there are, a few major concepts that kind of emerge that become what I would consider the points that I'm going to make in the message. And so I'll jot those points out very quickly. Now, that's just, again, that's me just kind of getting the big picture. I got a few ideas out there, a few points in front of me. And then I start doing real work on the text in the sense of studying commentaries and that kind of thing. And then I manuscript the whole message. So I usually don't even write an introduction. I usually start with whatever that first major point is, and I'll start doing a commentary kind of study, and then I'll kind of almost write my own commentary underneath it when I'm typing out the message. And then as I go through that for all three of those points, then I typically go back and I try to make the points applicational. So they kind of start off with I must, or you must, or we must, or I want to make it to where I'm taking that, whatever that point is, and I'm kind of putting it into the lap of the people who are there listening. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So once that's done, and I'm giving you the quick version here, but once that's done, then I basically look at the major points that I have, and I play Jeopardy. I know that sounds weird, but in my mind, I'm like, what's a key question I could ask that these 3 or 4 points would actually answer? And that takes a little while.
So you do the points first.
Yes.
Then you come back to
and then because once I get my key question, then I write my introduction lead to my key question.
Right.
And then the points are answering that question. Right. And so even when I preach, I usually say, hey, if you're a note taker, here's the question you want to write down at the top of your note. And I'll give them whatever that particular question is. And I'll say, here's the first answer. Here's the second answer. Here's the third answer. Does that make sense? Yeah. So then I walk them through, and then I conclude conclude the message. And regardless of what I'm preaching on, I always run to the gospel and give people an opportunity to respond.
Amen. So if you were a typical week, at what point in the week is the sermon finished? Are you is in the hopper?
That's a great question. So I write the whole thing on Monday. So that's all I do on Monday. I've got a little meeting on Monday afternoon with our executive leadership here, executive staff. But I come in. I mean, my ministry assistant knows, like, no phone calls, no nothing. It's just I'm in here in a seat until it's done. Which I know sounds crazy because some people kind of space it out throughout the week. And I've just found that I don't operate well that way. I'd rather just sit down, get the thoughts, work it out, type it all the way out, have it complete. And then on Wednesday, this is where it gets kind of a little weird because I'm like 3 weeks ahead, right? But on Wednesday mornings, like this morning I came in, I printed out for the first time the message that I'm preaching this Sunday, which I prepared 3 weeks ago, right? So I'm pulling it out. Matter of fact, it's sitting on my desk now. I'm reading through it. I'll do a read through of the whole message. At that point in time, I may make some notes. And again, it's manuscript typed out. I do it in basically Roman numeral 1, right? A, B, C, Roman numeral 2. That's kind of what it looks like as you look at the manuscript. But then on the sides, I'll just write extra notes that may come to mind, maybe a couple of illustrations that have popped out there as well, just as I've looked at it now with some fresh eyes. So I'll read through that on Wednesday. And, obviously our communications team here has the message as well. So they've created, a whole PowerPoint presentation, all that kind of jazz that they do to kind of enhance the message. And then, the other thing that I do is, Saturday at some point in time, I read through the message again. I'm underlining, I'm highlighting. I'm making sure that the point is clear, that it's understandable, that it makes sense to me. I read it out loud. And then Sunday morning, I come in early to the office. I read through the message a couple of times more. And then I go and preach in a couple of services.
Do you full text manuscript your illustrations?
Yes, most of the time I do. Now I'm not a good illustrator. Some people would say that I am, but I don't really feel like that I am. But I will fully type it out. If I don't fully type out the illustration, like sometimes an illustration will come to mind when I'm reading it, like on a Wednesday morning. But what I will do is I'll put a sentence that I should end that illustration on, and the transitional sentence that goes into the point that I'm trying to make. The last thing I want to do is try to, give an illustration and then jump to the point, not have that strong transition, because I'm trying to make it easy for the listener. I don't want them out there trying to figure out how that illustration fits. Does that make sense? So I want to give that to them, give them that transition, and then run right back into whatever I'm preaching on.
For me, illustrations. So I enjoy telling a story. Yeah. I just enjoy. And
you're phenomenal
the
at
storytelling. Oh God,
that's true.
But the problem with that is you can tell a story and it can take up more weight and space and time than it's
correct.
worth.
Yeah.
And so for me, several years ago, just as a discipline, I started full text writing out every illustration I used, and then being as disciplined as I could, never to use one off the cuff. Now, I'm saying I don't always, but because I realized I was giving some weight to some illustrations that were just, when you look at them on the paper, if they're taking up 2 sheets of paper, they're way too big.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Great story. Tell the kids about it after church.
Yeah.
But what's been interesting for me is that over the years, that has meant that I am using less and less and less and less stories.
Right, I gotcha.
And I've got them down now to if they're usually a paragraph. Now sometimes when I conclude, I'll do a little bit more, but within the sermon, I've gotten down to if it's a paragraph, it's long.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And part of that is I just found they're not as helpful. There's just so much more weight in the scripture that the story usually takes away from than it usually adds to.
No, yeah, sure. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. I mean, I'm looking right here at what I'm preaching this Sunday. I've got an illustration about the Dead Sea, right? So, but I'm looking at it 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like it's 4 sentences long, right? But I'm immediately going, that's a great imagery of what happens to a person who has truth, encouragement, and ministry flowing into their lives, but they have nothing flowing out of their lives, right? So it's that idea of just becoming a dead Christian kind of deal. So you can kind of, all that to say, that's more or less how I'm transitioning from water flows in, but the Dead Sea does not flow out. That's a good imagery of what happens to a person who has truth, but doesn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, and I've noticed too that those type of illustrations that are not personal, they don't have to be as long because you don't have a personal investment with them. They serve their purpose, and then that's it. Those personal stories, they have a life of their own, and,
They do.
and I'm not
That's
sure
very
it's
true.
a helpful life in a sermon.
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm just trying to give you a couple of real life examples. I mean, this past Sunday, I was preaching on spiritual maturity, and the passage, discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness is discipline is gymnazo. Sounds like gymnasium, right? So I talk about, hey man, I've gone to the gym. I work out at the gym, and whenever you show up, what do you have? You have a trainer showing up. And what are they saying? They're trying to teach you how to do everything. And then I'm just jumping right into, that's what disciple making is. We're basically spiritual trainers of those who need to mature in their faith. Does that make sense? Yeah. But I throw out a few. I mean, everybody's got personality, and their personality should play a role in preaching, because that's how your congregation feels like they actually get to know you. So when I do get into personal stories, they end up being funny. And then if somebody laughs, I'm gonna go a little further. I can make you laugh a little more. Right. You know what I mean? That's right. So that's kind of one of those things that just show up that I would say to you, if you looked at my manuscript, you wouldn't see all that written out. So you want all that. I guess what I'm getting at is I want I want to make sure I've got clarity on what I'm preaching. That's the manuscript. And if you read it, I mean, you would feel like you were reading a sermon. But when you listen to me preach it, if you were following with that, manuscript, you're also going to see that. I mean, there are times that you just want freedom to be able to share a little extra, something else that pops out. And sometimes some things actually pop into your mind while you're preaching. And this, but it's like
they can be helpful. They can also.
That's
be
what
dangerous.
I was going to say. That's when you got to have that air of discernment. That do I need to filter this, or is this something that needs to be?
Yes.
It's kind of Preaching is an odd thing, man.
So, do you go to the pulpit with your manuscript?
Oh yeah, I do. I walk up there, see my Bible. I mean, and I'm not even trying to hide it. You know what I mean? So I pull it right out, and put it on the pulpit there.
So just presence, the performance, the performative, or the presentation element of it, are you looking down a lot, or are you able to have it enough in your memory that you're able to keep
I would say I have enough in my memory to keep my head up, but I can glance down because I've read it so many times. I can glance down and oftentimes too, I didn't mention this, but I'll write like a big word out beside a particular section, which is kind of the theme of that particular section on the page. And so sometimes I can just glance down, see that word, and remember what's on the page. Now, that, by the way, is, we've been preaching for a long time. But it was not like that when I first started preaching. And I remember when I was pastoring at Concord, I went and ate with our associational missionaries. His name's JoJo Thomas. You may know him. Unbelievable guy. And so I'm sitting down with him. We're having a conversation, and preaching comes up. And, he's a preacher. So I'm like, hey, man, coach me up. Like, help me get better. And so he literally said, Levi, you look at your manuscript too much. You need to look up. So I said, okay, let's do this. You hold me accountable to that. I want to make sure that I'm looking up. And that little conversation over lunch one day was massively beneficial in just helping me get out of my notes and actually look at people. And that was, 10, 12 years ago. So that's been a massive help.
So it's interesting. So for me, I don't do a full manuscript, but I do. I just call it a thick outline. It's in outline format, but full sentences. It would, if you went in and edited it, it would easily become manuscript if you just took out all the formatting. Yeah. But over the years, when I was starting out, I went to the pulpit with almost nothing. I mean, it was a brief, very sparse outline.
You're much more bold than me.
Would be like,
I've never done that.
Well, I'm not saying it was smart or bold.
Right.
It was just what it was. And maybe one word for an illustration to spark my memory. Of course, a 20-year-old mind's a little bit sharper, at least quicker than
right. I got
now.
You sure.
But the freedom of that was, and I just would Jim clip it on the opposing page in my Bible. That's how small it was. And I would preach from that. In more recent years, moving toward a thicker, intense notes. And of course, now they've also increased in font size, so that has increased the page numbers as well. Oh man, I can't even see the notes I did back in the old days. But I've noticed I look down more, and for me that's more the desire to be more precise in my language.
Yes.
drove me deeper into my notes than what I was as a younger person. And I've wrestled with that. I don't want to look down, and the older I get, the bigger the bald spot gets, the less I want to look down. But
that's right. Hey, I will tell you though,
so Levi,
there's I don't know if you know Patrick Latham. He's a pastor at Tabernacle in Cartersville, Georgia, and he's a buddy of mine. We talk virtually every week, and we listen to each other preach. And the part of our conversation is, all right, talk to me, coach me up. What you like, what you not like. But all that to say, he might be a great guy to interview as well, because he's got where he's now preaching without any notes. And it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So Don Hadaway, who was there before him, is down here in South Georgia now.
Yep, First Douglas.
Not far from where we are. Yeah, First Douglas. So, yeah, I'll give Patrick a call.
Anyway.
So tell me something. Just in the labor of preaching, what do you enjoy about it? What lights your fire?
I love the preparation. Yeah, I absolutely love. I love preparing. So like when Monday morning rolls around, a lot of guys take Mondays off. I don't want to take Mondays off. You know what I mean? But I'll come in and I actually anticipate and look forward to doing that. It's a sit down. I'm studying the text. There's just a ton of fun in that for me personally. I mean, I get fired up just sitting behind the desk typing. I mean, sometimes I'm standing up going, I cannot wait to preach this. This is unbelievable. And then when Sunday rolls around, one of the things that I try to pray as I'm, in preparation and walking even towards the pulpit is just, Lord, use this for your glory. But then I'm like, Lord, this is actually going to help people. So I can't, and again, if I get that into my mentality, this is going to help people, then I can't wait to deliver that. So there's great, to say passion and fired up. I'm excited about delivering the message. I enjoy it, man. Now I will say that's a paradigm shift. When I first started preaching early on, I was like, man, I hope this goes over well. You know what I mean? I hope that they think I can preach good. Well, once I got the focus off of me, it's like I also freed up to preach. It was tremendous. And then just another free little insight here. Once I stopped trying to be somebody else in the pulpit, there was great freedom, right? So I went a few years when I first started preaching. So, of course, I pastored First Church when I was 23 years old. Well, I found another pastor who pastored a large church. I'm like, okay, that's how he preaches. I'm going to preach just like him. And it was exhausting. I was like, what am I doing, man? This is not even me. So finally, I'm like, all right, I've got to quit that. So I just started, I'm just going to be who I am. And if they like it, fine. If they don't, fine. There's nothing I can do about that. But I'm going to come up with something that I really do believe is going to be of benefit to their soul and their life. And I'm going to deliver it like that. This is going to help you.
Yes.
So that's been very, very freeing.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because one of the things that's behind this whole project is, and I'm not blaming those that I grew up under, because this is more what I picked up than necessarily what was being taught. But as a young man, and particularly early in the ministry, when you would ask, like, what's the word that used to be used a lot is he's a dynamic preacher. And
That's right. Yep.
It was communicating something about the performative value that it was interesting. And I was very interested, like, what is the secret sauce to being a great preacher? And what's the secret sauce of people coming up to you afterwards going, man, that was a great word? And all of my focus, or at least most of it, was on the things that were non-biblical. The how you presented and your storytelling and trying to be the hip and cool guy. Somewhere along the way, my heart just began to love more being faithful with the text than the stroking of the ego.
That's right.
And it does set you free.
Yes. Well,
because it's convictional, right? I'm convinced that the Word of God is the only thing the church needs, and
that's right.
And yet God uses the personality.
Yep. Yeah. You can see that just in writings of the New Testament. Paul has a distinct personality that shows up, and then Mark has a personality. Mark is that guy that's wanting to get it done, right? Because he's like every other word. He's like, and immediately. It's like, good night. This guy's in a hurry.
That's why I love the Gospel of Mark, partly because it's so short.
That's right.
Yes, brother, I'm with you.
That's right.
So you said you're preaching through John right now?
I am. Hey, can I throw in one other thing that I think is beneficial?
Yeah.
And this may sound wild, but so when I was at the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, I was preaching at churches all over Georgia, and that wasn't necessarily anything new to me because even though I was pastoring in Northeast Georgia, I was still preaching in several other places. But what I discovered is that if I would spend time with the people before I preached, it actually helped me preach. So here at Sagemont, I mean, that's one thing that I love. I will walk the halls before every single service, talking to people, chatting with people, all the way to the point. I know this sounds crazy, and I do this. I mean, I will get in the golf cart in the parking lot and drive around and pick people up and bring them to church from their vehicles. And people are like, what in the world? Don't wear yourself out. But what I've learned on this is that it actually builds credibility so that when I stand up to preach, it's not like I'm some kind of guy who just floated in from the backstage. They know me. And that...
You're not a green room preacher.
Do what now?
You're not a green room
not at all.
preacher?
Matter of fact, there is one here. And I was like, I probably won't be using that. You know what I mean? Because I'm going to be out here hanging out with folks. But and again, everybody's wired differently. Some guys need that solitude to stay focused because if they are around a whole bunch of people prior to, going to preach, then they're just scatterbrained. So I don't want to, I guess what I'm getting at is I don't want to throw stones at somebody who's wired differently than me. But the reality is I've seen how the Lord has used that to build credibility before I even get up to deliver a word from the Word.
Well, and Levi, just knowing you, I would put that in the category of the wheelhouse of how God has gifted you. So, you just naturally connect, and there's and I don't mean this negatively toward others, but there are some people who just naturally are aloof.
Correct. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And that's not you.
Yeah.
So, you're very comfortable in multiple contexts with big fancy folks and normal folks alike. And, and, I could see how that feeds your soul and how it blesses your ministry.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun.
All right, so we talked about what you love about preaching. Tell me what you least enjoy about preaching.
Oh, my word, man. What I least enjoy about preaching. That is a great question. So, and this is going to be more on the receiving end than the delivering end. The thing that I can't stand is when I sense that there are people who could care less. Right? So now maybe that's righteous indignation, or maybe that's a little bit of maybe that's some unrighteous indignation mixed in there. I'm not real sure. But now thankfully I try not to pay attention to those individuals, right?
But it's hard not to.
It is. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. Yeah. So that would be, and some of that is like, man, if you would pay attention, you'd be shocked at how the Lord would change your life. You know what I mean? If you would apply what we're talking about this morning, it would revolutionize how you live. Because how you're living now, I can just look at you and tell it ain't working. So
I had a guy at a previous church that hated my guts. I mean, just genuinely did not care for me. And yet he never missed a service.
Wow.
I just always wondered about, brother, you're the most faithful attender we've got. And it would sit out there with his arms crossed and that grumpy look. Right. And I thought, I mean, I don't know who's torturing who worse, is you being here because you hate me, and me having to preach and look at you.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's right. But no, as far as like the least, the what I don't like, or what I just don't like about preaching, I mean, I can't really put my finger on anything specific, right?
Or maybe differently said, what's hard to you about preaching?
The hard part is the preparation.
Yeah, you love it and you find it hard.
Yeah, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. I mean, lifting weights is hard, but I enjoy doing that. You know what I mean? Because I know it makes me feel better at the end of the day. So it's one of those things where it's like I don't want to say love-hate relationship. It's just because something's difficult and, you've got to work at it doesn't mean it's not enjoyable.
Yeah. So one of the things that's happened in the church of more recent, it seems like to me, since COVID 2020, around in there, it really expanded and exploded. Is the rise of media, and I know we've always had radio and TV, but everybody can do a podcast now, and of course everybody's live streaming now, and those sort of things. It's certainly been, it's been a positive in some ways. I'm thankful for the ability to connect with our homebound and those sort of things. But there have been, I've dealt with just the consumer attitude of some, that I'm consuming a sermon, therefore, they're seeing that as a replacement of being with the saints on the Lord's Day. Interesting, I pulled up, I guess it was your most recent sermon on your website, and I appreciated the fact you did a little intro before the video cut to to the pulpit and you preaching. And in that little video, you welcomed folks, and you said, "I'm glad you're here." But the phrase you used was, "This is not a supplement for going to church." And then you said, "I hope you find a church that, if you're not here locally, go find a church that's faithfully preaching the gospel." And I thought that was a helpful word. So at a church your size, you've got some ability to do some media things that churches of smaller budget and smaller attendance don't do. So just talk with me from your perspective, some of the things that God's using that to expand the gospel ministry, preaching ministry in a positive way, and talk about how some of the dangers or difficulties you found and how y'all addressed those.
Well, first of all, I'm a proponent of going to church. The Hebrew author says, don't skip church. So you need to go to church. Yes. And you need to plug into the life of the ministry. So my I guess theology on this is, we know God loves us because of the cross. He died for us, he's buried and resurrected. So that's no, there's no greater picture of love towards us. But we experience the love of God in the fellowship of other believers. So I'm experiencing God's love through the service of the saints. So as people are serving in the life of the body and it's influencing me, that's actually an extension of God's love. So when you remove yourself from worship with people, you're actually removing yourself from the practical expression of the love of God in your life. That's a problem. So anyway, all that to say, people ought to go to church. You with me? I just preached a little bit on that one.
Yeah,
all right,
I'm with you.
Yeah, so that one's massive. But so as far,
it's not but the point is the consuming of your sermon on a podcast is not the same thing as sitting in the room with the church hearing. It's
not the same thing as iron sharpening iron among believers. That's exactly right. So now here's the deal. I listen to preaching. I listen to it all the time, right? So, and what is it? It does feed my soul. There's no doubt about that. But I'm not a member of that particular church that I'm listening to. I don't know people in that church. They don't know me. So there is that disconnect. Now, there is value in the sense of allowing, putting the message out there so that people can view it, because you're going to have some folks who are unchurched who will stumble into it and hear the gospel and give their heart to Jesus. So I'm totally for that. At the same time, you'll have individuals who will actually watch online long before they'll ever come into your church for the first time as a guest. I have that. Very regularly, people will come through our guest line. I'm shaking their hand. I'm getting to know them. And then they're like, man, this is the first time we've come. We've been watching for the past 3 months. And I'm like, it's so much better to be here, isn't it? You know what I mean? So that's my follow-up question, or statement, I should say. But now, also, it gives an opportunity to kind of give you just a real practical example here. We had a mission team that went to Kenya a couple of weeks ago. And there was a guy who's been watching us online from Kenya for the past 6 months. And so the guy who oversees that ministry here on staff for us was on the Kenyan mission trip. And so he shot an email while they were in Kenya and said, hey, I'm super excited that you're, watching online. We're actually on a mission trip here in Kenya. Would love to meet you if you're present. And nearby, we're in Nairobi. The guy was like 3 blocks away. So he came and hung out with the team throughout the week. And he's also a part of an online small group that we've established. So through our, just through the preaching, concept, we encourage people to take another step to get plugged in online with a small group. And oftentimes that will include some people.
Wait, the small group is an online.
Yeah, there'll be an online small group. So they'll do those things over Zoom. And those are people.
Okay.
We have some people. I mean, just to be quite honest, we have some folks like a guy in Kenya. We have others who are international, who just don't have a church home where they currently live. Some of them are living, basically in villages in the sticks. We even have some people in the U.S. who are in rural areas, but they have the internet. And so they're using that. They're using the message to drive their online small group engagement. And some of them are actually having small group Bible studies based on whatever the message was. So there's some good things, but to your point, it's like I want people in church.
Yeah. For me, I've noticed it's the heart behind it. So I've got some folks who, because of some physical conditions in their life, they physically cannot come and be.
We have the same. That's exactly right.
And when I talk with them, there is a heartbrokenness that they desire to be with the church and they can't be. And they'll say they've oftentimes expressed appreciation for being able to watch online, but then they almost always follow that up with, but it's not the same. And so we sort of have that comforting, yes, I know. And then on the flip side of that, I've got some folks who are really more concerned about travel ball and vacations and those sort of things, and they want me to acknowledge that they watch as almost like they get credit for watching. And so they'll say, "Hey, we're close enough to Disney World. You can get down there in a day." And so they'll have gone to Disney World, and then they're driving back, and I've even had people take pictures like of me on their phones while they're driving down the interstate. Going, "Hey, we watched church today."
That's right. Yeah.
And there's part of me that goes, "Well, I'm appreciative of that, but pull over and find a church."
Exactly right. Yeah. Well, that's it. That's one of those things too. The scripture in Hebrew says, as is the habit of some, meaning that some have made it a habit of skipping church. Yeah. And there are things that bump into the life of a family that can create the habit of skipping church. That's where I'm like, okay, now you're in danger. If it's a habitual thing, and obviously because I'm preaching on the mission of the church, one of the messages was on worship, and we focused on corporate worship. I said, listen, in your family on Saturday nights, you shouldn't be sitting around saying, hey, y'all want to go to church tomorrow? Like, that shouldn't even be a question. It should be a given. That's what y'all are doing, right? Nobody, if you're asking that question, it's like, well, okay, it's because you've gotten to the habit of skipping. So all that to say, people are going to go on vacations. I get that. I go on vacation. So that's going to happen. But the idea of just habitually, that's where you want to just call them, say, hey, look, man, don't do that.
As parents, we don't always know what we're doing that's blessing our children and not blessing our children.
That's right.
But one of the things my dad did growing up is whenever we traveled, and it didn't matter for what, vacation or anything else, part of the plans of our travels were, mom and dad did this, part of their plans were that on the Lord's Day, we were in church. And so, growing up, I was in big and small all across the nation when we were going in churches. And that, I don't know if I think they were just doing it out of obedience, just as a personal obedience for them. But for me as a kid growing up in their home, it communicated to me, there's something about the Lord's Day worship that supersedes everything else.
That's right. Do. Yeah. That's right. That's good.
And as a pastor, I get paid. I'm a full-time staff, and I've told our staff here, don't ever let it be the testimony of your life that the only time you go to church is when somebody's paying you to be there.
That's great.
I don't want that to be my story, right. And I want it big.
Mm.
Yeah. So we're about the same age, and
you're older than me, just for the record, man.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead. But I appreciate that, brother. We have entered the ministry sort of at the end of the great cultural Christianity bubble, at the zenith of it. Yeah. We will probably end our ministry unless the Lord brings a great revival in a world very, very differently. Church culture in general, very differently than what we started ministry in. So talk with me just from your perspective. How do you see that affecting preaching? Like, where does preaching fit in that? And How is it changing how we approach the pulpit?
Well, so let me kind of give this to you on just the basis of where I'm located now. So Houston is a unique city. It's the fourth most diverse city in America. And actually, I take that back. I think it's the most diverse city in America and then the fourth largest city in America. So what is unique here is that we are surrounded by any and every culture you can possibly think of. And so when we just recently did some demographic study on our area, the largest population are 25 to 35 who are singles who are living in our area. So that's a cultural difference, right? So you and I back in the day, it's like, we grew up quick because, part of the culture was you get married, you start having children. Well, getting married and starting to have children makes you grow up real fast. You know what I mean? Well, it's a little different though.
The children part.
That's exactly right. It's massively different though when you're 35 years old and you're still single, and you still maybe some growing up still hasn't occurred. So all of that, I guess what I'm getting at here is I've got to know my audience when I'm preaching. So I want to preach in such a way that the audience actually understands what I'm saying. So I don't use massive theological terms very often. When I do make points in the sermon, if I have to explain the point, like what the words in the point, then I just say it. That's not a good point, right? I need to say it in such a way that everybody can pick up on it. And then at the same time, looking at our culture right now, and I just went through this, it's 5 disruptive church trends that will rule 2025. One of them was actually saying that people in that category, that age range that I just mentioned, are actually more open to spiritual conversations than they have been over the past 20 or 30 years. Now, that doesn't mean they're just, open to Christian, the gospel. They're open to anything. It's like they just want to hear. But the beauty of that is at least they have an ear that they want to listen to. Because some of them are looking at their parents, they're looking at their life, they're saying, man, what we've been doing is just not working. So they're experiencing this existential crisis way out. And then they're basically saying, okay, I've got to figure this thing out. And so they're paying attention. I just baptized 2 weeks ago a young lady who was a Hindu. Somebody met her in a restaurant, started talking to her, and then all of a sudden started meeting with her every single week for about 6 weeks, share the gospel with her. She came to know the Lord Jesus. Now she's plugged into the ministry. But that is just, okay, we've got to open our eyes as church people, and we've got to live like people are actually dying and going to hell and care about it, and start building some genuine relationships with people to share the gospel. And then from that, too, this is probably a longer answer than you're wanting, but because we live in such a diverse area and culturally, what I have realized and come to discover is that a lot of the cultures who do live here actually bring with them a hospitality culture, meaning it was normal where they grew up to have people over to their homes. Okay, if that's the case, then I've got to start thinking like this. The front door of the church is not really the front door of our church. The front door of the church is the front door of my house. How can I start bringing people into my home, spending time with them, and sharing Jesus with them, and then getting them plugged into the church? So it's just a little bit different. Does that answer that question? I don't even remember what the question was.
It was a great question. Well, I was asking about how with cultural changes around us, and that's what you were talking about. How do we approach the pulpit?
That's right. Well, and that's it. I guess that will be just you approach it with a clear, mind and heart, and just realize not everybody in there grew up in church like you did. Not everybody knows every single story that you know. So oftentimes if I'm bringing up, if I'm preaching from the New Testament, like I have been in John's Gospel, and there's a Moses motif in that, that text, like the feeding of the 5,000, and I'm going to reference Moses, I got to tell the story of Moses. And I will often say this. Now, if you grew up in church, you've heard this before, but let me just refresh your memory, and I'll tell them the story. And I will be honest with you, I never underestimate the power of just telling the biblical story. People lean into that. Yes. I mean, they're like, and I'll be honest, when I'm listening to a guy preach and he starts telling the story of, of David, or telling the story of Moses or Noah or whatever, I find myself leaning into it. And I know the story. So all that to say, the Bible's not boring.
No, and I've found that even, in my context, you would assume, I'm South Georgia, you would assume that most folks know the Bible, but that's just
it's not
true
at all
anymore.
Well, and two, I'm thinking of Georgia right now. The hardest people to win to faith in Jesus are often the people who think they know the story of the gospel. So often, you share Jesus. So do you feel like you're going to go to heaven? They're like, oh yeah. Tell me why are you so confident? And then they'll start talking about how good they are. And you're like, well, the Bible doesn't teach that. And then you start sharing the gospel with them. And then they look at you, oh yeah, I know that. I believe that. I'm like, no, you don't. If you believe that, that's what you would have said to begin with. You started off telling me you were a good guy. Do you get where I'm coming from? So it's almost like, familiarity, especially with the gospel, has just led to this. They haven't trusted Jesus for the salvation of their soul.
Right.
So anyway.
Well, but the encouraging thing to me, at least from where I sit, is I'm in a sea of lots and lots of churches. Yeah. So there are churches, big and small, every direction from me. And every one of them, even the largest churches in our community, are struggling with declining attendance because of just a culture that once was a culture that when you got up on Sunday morning, it wasn't a question of if you went to church, it was just where you went.
That's right, yeah.
So most of our churches around here are, they're not full, and that is certainly a heartbreak. But what I'm watching with great encouragement is the pulpits of those churches are more and more filled with men who want to be precise and faithful with the text, and the preaching is much more intense than I think it was in previous generations. Not to diminish the preaching of previous generations, but I'm thinking when you're preaching to a community that's showing up anyway, and that's grew up in Sunday school, went to vacation Bible school, and can parrot at least the gospel testimony.
Yeah, sure.
There wasn't maybe an intensity or a weight to make sure that you're precise and clear.
That's right. Yeah.
But I'm encouraged. I just find that a great. It's almost as if as the excess dissipates, the church is being purified, and I find that a positive thing.
Yeah, that's very good. And I will say, I'm just finding. I saw this in Georgia too. I'm finding myself surrounded by people who are curious. So let them be curious.
What's amazing to me?
Yeah.
Those folks are not as. You can speak more honestly to those folks about what the Bible says.
Yeah, than church people sometimes, right?
Than your church people, because they're offended.
Right.
They're offended.
That's right. I think that happened with Jesus, with the Pharisees and Sadducees, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
I had a conversation the other day in a home. I was visiting with a lady that has recently moved to our community, and she asked me a question about a particular sin, and I gave a very honest answer. Yeah. And the next thing out of her mouth was, I did that. And I thought, this conversation is not going to go well. But then she followed up and she said, I just appreciate you being honest about what the scripture says.
That's right.
And then when I left her home, she said, I'll see you Sunday. And sure enough, God bless her.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I thought, that's a beautiful.
That really is, man. That really is. Well, and I will say, man, just to kind of, brag on Sagemont a little bit. Sagemont is just a great church, man. Like super hospitable to people who are guests. They're very, this is what I know of them, having been here for just over a year. They're very much like inviting people who are unchurched. They're bringing their neighbors. They're bringing coworkers with them. And I know that for a fact because they're introducing those people to me before service, after service, in between services. Like, hey, this is so-and-so. He just started work with us, and he's from wherever. And, I met a guy from Brazil this past Sunday. Then I met another guy from Austin, Texas. And they are brand new folks who just kind of moved into the area, and they were invited by somebody. So I don't want to, again, don't undervalue just the power of people inviting. Now, that also means from our end as pastors and preachers, we've got to give them something to invite folks to. So I don't want to be haphazard in the pulpit. I don't want to be messy. I don't want to be messy with my presentation. I don't want to look like I haven't prepared. We want to do ministry with excellence, because I know that they're going to be inviting folks. And the reason they're inviting them is because they feel confident that if they can bring their neighbor, their friend, their coworker to church, that they're not going to be embarrassed. Does that make sense? So, I mean, there's some, I mean, you got to look at that as a preacher. I mean, obviously you're kind of the leader of that particular worship service. So make sure it's done well.
Yeah. It is amazing to me. I tell our church all the time, what makes a great pastor is a great church.
Yeah, no kidding. That's exactly right.
A great church will make
exactly
a
right.
mediocre guy look
Yeah, that's
good.
right. That's exactly right.
Well, I want to conclude with just a two-part question here. You started ministry really young. You were still in college when you started preaching?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been doing this just even longer than most guys your age, though you've been clear to say that you're younger
That's
than
right.
me. So for a moment here, speak to young Levi. So if you could speak back into your life when you first started, what things would you say, young Levi, you need to do these things? And what things would you say to young Levi, don't do these things or stop doing these things?
Well, on the stop, because that's an easy one, very quickly, I'll just say, hey, Levi, stop comparing yourself to others. Stop thinking that you're actually better than you really are. And everybody else ought to recognize that, because that's just your ego. And then I would also say, stop trying to get ahead of the Lord. Those would be just three things off the top of my head I would say to young Levi, right? I probably would say the same thing to, 47-year-old Levi right here. And then, I would say to a young Levi or young pastor, do not disregard your own personal time alone with the Lord. That is what feeds your soul. Don't neglect it. So that's a discipline that I was taught in my home growing up, and that's a discipline I hold till today. And that's been my life source. Just getting along with the Lord every morning. Not preparing for a sermon, not studying the scripture that I'm going to preach on in my devotion. I'm always studying something completely different personally, because I don't want the two to kind of merge. You know what I mean? It's like, this is just me and the Lord right here. So that's massively beneficial. And then I guess I would also say to young Levi, the Lord is preparing you for where He's taking you. So be good with the prepreration. Does that make sense? In that, yeah, because sometimes you're getting in and honestly, man, when I first started pastoring, I was 23, and I started preaching when I was 19 or whatever. But when I started pastoring, I was 23, and man, I just thought, well, this church ought to be gangbusters. You know what I mean?
They ought to be appreciative of what they have.
Yeah, man, I go back and listen to them sermons. I'm like, I can't believe anybody came to church on Sunday. So, yes. But all of that to say, it's kind of like it was just I don't know, man. I finally started figuring out I had to get over myself about three years into it, and settle into actually caring about the people that God has, so graciously provided to the family in the church. Care about their spiritual growth. You know what I mean? Care about their spiritual growth. Pour into them, and the Lord take care of everything else. And then too, I've always sought to have some sort of discipling relationship where I'm actually discipling groups of men. And man, that's been a life source. You know what I mean? That's just huge. Mm-hmm. And I started that when I first started preaching as well. And I've just continued that. I mean, this will be my third group of guys I've discipled since I've been in Sagemont that I'm meeting with tonight. That's a value add, right? It's a value add. Pastoring a church is a whole lot more than just preaching on Sunday morning.
Indeed.
So anyway, I think that answers a little bit of your question.
I think there is a special grace that is given and a special blessing from those churches that call and put up with guys right in the beginning of
Oh, 100%.
I was talking to a guy yesterday that retired guy, been in the ministry 60, nearly 70 years. And we were talking about that. And I said, recently I found the audio recording of the first sermon I preached in the church right out of seminary. And it wasn't the first time I'd preached, but I thought I was pretty impressive. Right. I was cutting edge and it was the awfulest thing you've ever heard.
That's right. Yeah.
Nobody will ever hear it but my wife and I, and I'll probably
That's right.
It'll be lost to history. But God bless that sweet church for putting up with me and encouraging. And they were an encouragement to us.
They were to me too.
Well, I thought I was such.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, Levi, brother, thank you so much for your time today. You've been gracious with it, and I know the Lord's blessing you there at Sagemont, and they have a fine pastor and a fine preacher, and I'm glad they have you.
Well, listen, I appreciate it, man. Always good to catch up with you too, man. Appreciate you big time.
Thank you for listening to View from the Pulpit. For more information, go to my website at bensmithsenior.org. That's bensmithsr.org. You can follow me on X at x.com/BenSmithSR. I look forward to meeting you next week for another conversation on View from the Pulpit.